Hello again, it's me Mandala, and today I wanted to explore a new niche for open world buildcraft, which is a series I'm going to be calling budget builds. So with budget builds, we are shifting the conversation away from the ultra high rarity, very expensive endgame gear and build sets to a more approachable and easy to gear uh, buildcraft options for newer players or players who aren't as committed to the builds as uh, they would have to be for those rarer, more expensive sets. So the goal for this series is to still give you a great build that's going to function well in the majority of open world and casual play, but that's going to be cheap and easy to gear. And so I'm going to do this first video, which is going to be a quickness power Herald. And if people like this idea and people want to see more of these budget builds, these really cheap but efficient and effective builds for open world, then just give this video a lot of attention and I'll make some more. I have a couple different other builds that I already have ready to do for this series if people are interested. So I'm going to go into this one and then we'll see how it goes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get off of this Vindicator build that I have and I'm going to switch over to the Power Herald. And so as you can see, I have no gear on, nothing equipped, and so the first step of this build is going to be to show you where you can get the really cheap, still decent gear for very little money, for very little gold. So we're in Lion's Arch, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the trading post, which is just down here off the top of this big shell, and I'm going to explain really quickly how to get gear from the trading post for very cheap, and what kind of gear we're looking for. So 1 second, and then really quickly we are going to go into that. Alright, so when you get to the trading post, it can be really confusing on how to best approach buying gear, but the trading post is really well designed, is a really well designed system and has a lot of really great filters. So where we're going to start in this journey to craft our budget build is we're going to go to the armor section here, this armor tab. We're going to click this, and then we're going to go to this little gear next to the search bar, and this is where we're going to find all the filters. Alright, so for this build, we're running a power quickness Herald. So for this Herald, we are going to be looking for mostly Berserker gear. And so Berserker gear is going to have the attributes of power. And so we're going to select power. It's going to have the attribute of precision. Select precision. And it's going to have the attribute of ferocity. So now we have power, precision, ferocity. And so we're only going to see in our options, we're only going to see Assassin's gear, Berserker gear, and Celestial gear, and then a few other off-brand gears. We're going to keep this at Revenant, right, because we want gear for our character, which is a Revenant. And then we're going to change this rarity to rare. So the reason we're doing rare gear is because exotic gear on the trading post is actually quite expensive. As you can see, lots of gold to get these exotic pieces. It's not a lot of gold for like super committed endgame players, but if you're testing out builds or you're very new, this is a very intimidating barrier to exploring open world buildcraft, and so we are not going to go for the exotic rarity. We're going to go one down from exotic, and that's going to be rare gear. So we're going to select rare gear, and then the very important last step we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our level range here is level 80 to 80. So we want to make sure we're only seeing level 80 gear on this side here, and then that'll help us only see level 80 rare gear with power, precision, and ferocity as our stats. Okay, and so once we have those filters locked in, the next thing we're going to do to make this a little less confusing on the left is we're going to go to this armor filter, and we're going to filter it even further, and we're just going to click one piece of armor. So we're just going to go down the list, and we're going to select, and so as you see, once we hit chest, our options from the trading post are much more limited and much easier to sift through. And so we're going to click that, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click this little price tab, and this will price it from the least expensive to most expensive, and that'll help us find the cheapest gear. And so again, we're looking for Berserker gear for our armor. So this is our pick. We're going to buy this for 25 silver, and then it'll end up in our delivery box. And we're just going to go through all the pieces of the armor and do the same thing. So you see our filters persist as we go to the next armor piece. And so we're going to buy this one for the legs. We're going to go to gloves, and we're going to buy the cheapest gloves, the Berserker gloves here. We're going to go down to headgear, and we're going to buy the cheapest headgear, which is, again, these open world Berserker. These sets you can find in the open world, which is why they're cheaper than the craftable sets that you're seeing down here. And then after that, we're going to skip aquatic headgear for now. We'll come back to this. We're going to go to boots, and we're going to buy the cheapest boots. Go to shoulders, buy the cheapest shoulders. And then when we come to back item, you're going to see our filter kind of goes away. So back items are a little trickier. Back items are more rare to find with valuable stats. So we're going to come back to that at the very end. So we're going to skip that for now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to buy our accessories. So as you can see, when we click on accessories, the rare accessories are kind of expensive. All right, and this is kind of out of the range for the budget I'm trying to cater to with these budget builds. I think these are slightly too expensive, and so what we're going to do is we're going to go to this filters again, and we're going to change it from rare to masterwork. So we're going to lose a little bit of stats here, but what we're going to do, as you can see, is we're going to drastically reduce the price. And so we have two options in the accessories right now as far as the trinkets go, and we have the ruby mithril earrings and the opal mithril earrings. And so with the current build that I'm trying to make, we're going to buy one of each of these. So instead of just doing a solid Berserker set all the way through, we're going to have a few what we call Assassin's trait pieces, and I'll just tell you what they are so you don't have to think too hard about it, but we're going to buy one of each of these, and then we'll move on to the next trinket. Alright, so now that we have our accessories, we're going to move on to amulets. And so as you can see, there's a really super cheap Berserker amulet that we can buy. But we're going to actually opt for just the ruby mithril amulet. You could do some more, you could actually thrift a little harder and buy this and then buy the upgrade separately, but it's only going to save you like a few silver, so we're just going to buy the ruby mithril amulet. So again, this is Berserker gear. So this is our third trinket, and then we're going to go to rings. All right, and these are the last accessories we're going to buy. So for these ones, again, you could be a little thriftier and buy the Berserker ring, and then buy this brilliant ruby jewel upgrade, and it'll be a little cheaper. But we're just going to buy the ruby mithril ring, and again, we're going to split between the Berserker trinket and the assassin trinket. So we're also going to buy one of these opal mithril rings, which is the assassin stat, which has precision primary. And you'll see why we do that in a little bit. So we're going to buy those, all right? And now we have a lot of our gear set. So really quickly, I'm just going to take all these into our wallet, and then we're going to put them on. So really quickly, we're going to put on what we have, and then we'll go through more of the items we need to finish off the build. It's going to ask you if you want to soul bind these pieces, and you should just say yes because they're not that expensive, and it just means that you can't move these to other characters, but that's really not a big deal with rare gear. Again, the reason why this build is why we're doing this with the rare gear is because these items are super cheap, and so you're not going to feel badly that you've bound these items to just one of your characters. Next thing we're going to do is the trinkets we bought. So one ruby mithril, one opal mithril, amulet, the ring, and the other ring. Alright, so now we've got a lot of our stuff locked in. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick our weapons. So for this particular build, we are going to want sword, and staff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here, go back to the trading post, I'm going to click weapons, and we could have done this at the same time as we did the other one, but we're just going to reset the filters to power, precision, ferocity, keep it on Revenant, rarity, rare, and we're going to make sure that the gear is level 80. Alright, so once we have those filters down, we're going to select the weapons we want. So the first one we want is sword, and we're going to sort by price descending. And so what I've decided to do is, since these two swords are almost identical in price, we're going to buy the flame serpent sword because it's just a little prettier. And we actually want two of these because this build runs two swords in one of our weapon sets. So buy the two swords, and then the next weapon we're going to buy is going to be a staff. So we're going to go to staff, and again, our filters persist. So if you did all of this in one go, that's also good. But again, we're gonna be a little less thrifty than what is most optimal, and buy the flame serpent just because it's a better skin. So we're gonna buy the flame serpent, and now we have our weapons. So we're gonna take those, and we're gonna put those on in just a second. But first, we're gonna talk about the back piece again. So as far as back pieces go, under this armor section, if we go to back items. Again, once you see that our filters persist, and we can't actually find what we want if we have the filters so precise. So instead of putting in the stat filters, we're just going to put in a rarity filter and make sure we're finding level 80 gear. And this is going to give us a few options here. And so the one I've been picking is this Cavalier's one because it has power and ferocity, and it doesn't have precision, but it has toughness, which is okay. And these are really just our only options. If you find a stat set, a back piece in the open world closer to Berserker, just put it on. That's fine. But this is what we're buying for now. So Cavalier Spine Guard, it's going to cost us 30 silver. And buy that, and then we're going to take all this stuff and we're going to put it on again. Alright, so now we have most of our gear set acquired. So the last piece that we're going to do is we're going to find some upgrade components for the things that don't have the proper upgrades. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to buy a set of runes.
May Melandru guide you.
And so for this rune set, for this build, the rune set I've been going for is the Superior Rune of Fireworks. And so this is actually an exotic tier rarity upgrade, but the reason we're still buying this in our budget build is because it's so cheap. It's only 14 silver. So we're going to buy 6 of these. Six. Buy. Take these. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to buy sigils. So sigils go into your weapons, and so the sigils we want to buy is Superior Sigil of Accuracy. Again, this is an exotic sigil, but it's pretty cheap, so we're gonna buy 2 of them because we have 2 weapon sets. And then we're going to buy a Major Sigil of Force. And these are super cheap because these are rare rarity. And so we're gonna buy 2 of those. We're going to take those, then we're going to go back to our gear, and we are going to equip all of these into the slots. So we're going to put the runes into the armor, one in each piece, and don't worry about destroying the rune that was already in there. Those aren't very optimal. You want to run 6 of the superior set. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in our sigils. So we want 1 of each sigil in each weapon set. So do that. Same for the staff. And there we go. So we have one more thing to do, and that's to put an upgrade component in this Cavalier Spine Guard. And so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the trading post. We're going to type in Brilliant Ruby Jewel, and so this is the same rarity upgrade component that we have in all of our other stuff in the trinkets. So we're just going to take this off the trading post. We're going to go back to our hero panel by pressing H. We're going to click the Cavaliers, and then we're going to click this. We're going to click upgrade. And as you can see, now we're at almost exactly, and if we're on sword, it is exactly 50% crit chance. And so now we have our build fully geared. And so as you can see, we only spent a little bit of gold. I think when I opened the trading post, I was somewhere around 14 gold, and now I'm around 9 gold. So for about 5 gold total, which you can make in this game in minutes. You can make 5 gold in literal minutes in this game, and 5 gold is not hard to come by. If you did uh, certain activities for an hour, you can make 30 plus gold in this game. So 5 gold is really easy to acquire, and so for 5 gold, we were able to gear this build in this rare gear. So the next thing I want to do is go over the actual traits of the build. So we have our gear down, and now we're going to go over what the traits are really quickly. So one sec, and then we'll go over what the traits are. So as far as traits, this build is running the Invocation line, the Devastation line, and of course the Herald line because we're playing Power Herald. So the Invocation line, we're taking Rising Tide for a damage increase. We're taking Incensed Response for might generation when we give ourselves Fury. And then we're taking Roiling Mists, which allows us to go, instead of Fury giving us 25% extra crit chance, it gives us 50% extra crit chance. And so when we have Fury, that 50% from Fury adds to the 50% we have from our gear, and that gives us 100% crit chance. The second line we're running is Devastation, and we're taking Unsuspecting Strikes for a damage increase. We're taking Notoriety so that our might gives us more power damage and less condition damage, which is good because we're running a power build. And then lastly, we're taking Swift Termination, and this is again just a damage bonus. And so finally, in the Herald line, we're going to be taking Rising Momentum, which is just gain increased movement speed. You can also take, if you don't like Rising Momentum, you could take Elder's Respite, which is just as good and more defensive. So really this first line is not, it's not really that important which one you take. So for now we'll just take Elder's Respite, so regen is more valuable. In the second trait, we're going to take Shared Empowerment, which means when applying a boon to an ally, also gain might to nearby allies, and this is going to work on us as well. And then finally, we're going to take the Quickness trait in the Grandmaster trait line, trait column. We're going to take Elevated Compassion, and so heal allies when you grant them boons, and then grant boons to allies when your upkeep cost is equal to or higher than the threshold, which is 6, and that boon that we're going to give is Quickness. So we're also going to gain concentration based on power. I'm not sure if that still is part of this. It might be. Uh, and then we have just a lot of concentration on this build naturally because Herald was designed as a boon support class. So once that's all done, we're going to make sure, the last thing we're going to do to make sure our build is fully ready is we're going to make sure we have the Legendary Dragon Stance legend selected, and then the other legend we're going to do is the Dwarf, so Legendary Dwarf Stance. And so once you have that, you pretty much have your entire build for this budget build, this budget power, quickness, Herald. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go demo the build a little bit and show you that yes, this build is very good. It works very well in open world, and explain to you a little bit of how it works. So we're going to go do that really quick, and then we might talk a little bit more about this series and what these builds are meant to do. So one second, I'm going to get us to where we can test the build, and then I'll be back. And so really quickly, some things that you might have noticed that I didn't do is in this build, we didn't do our underwater weapons, and the reason we didn't is because underwater is a little more niche, but you can do the exact same process that we did on the trading post for finding the above the ground weapons and armor. Is you can go through the filters. You're not going to find an aquatic headpiece that's any good, so you just take the one you can get, which is going to be it's just going to be the rare one. It's like a stupid cheap like 20 silver one. But for the underwater weapons, you should be able to find exotic pieces and just put the same sigils And in the aquatic headpiece, you can even put another rune, a seventh rune of the firework, if you want to make sure you get that boon duration. But it shouldn't matter that much in underwater. You're not gonna necessarily notice the difference. But really quickly, we're gonna be in the Golem room, and I'm gonna explain how this build works a little bit before we start. So when you're running around open world on Herald, I like to have the facet of light, the facet of strength, and the facet of elements just permanently running because it keeps us above the depreciation threshold on our energy, and it allows us to generate boons. You're gonna hear this annoying. It's not annoying. It's a pretty sound, but it kind of interacts poorly with like music in the game sometimes. But it's like humming the like. I don't know how to describe it, but you're gonna hear the herald sound. But this allows us to generate some boons out of combat while we run. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spawn the Golem and show you kind of how the rotation works. We're just running one DPS weapon set because I think it just simplifies the playstyle and then lets our second set be utility. But this second weapon can be anything you want, and we'll talk about that more a little later. But I'm just going to do a quick demo on the Golem to show you that, yes, this build does damage. Even though it's only in rare gear, it's going to do decent damage on the Golem. So I'm going to spawn the Golem, and then I'll do that. Alright, so as you can see, we're doing pretty decent damage for being in rare gear. So this is, again, we're in full rare gear, and the build is doing a lot. So if you were watching and paying attention to my boon bar during the Golem pull, you'll see we had permanent access to 25 stacks of might, we had swiftness, we had fury, we had regen, we had quickness, and then we also had majority uptime protection from the facet of chaos. I messed up a little bit and accidentally double clicked it, but if you have actual keybinds, you're probably not going to do that, and it's probably going to be much smoother. Herald is a tough one for me because I've just refused to um, get better keybinds, and because most of Guild Wars 2 doesn't force you to, but Herald is one of the few where just having better keybinds is very valuable. So we did 10k DPS, as you can see over here in our log, and that's pretty decent for open. Again, you're going to do a lot more if you have higher rarity gear, and you could be a little more optimal, but the point of these builds is to give you a strong, decently survivable build that you can run in the open world on the cheap, right? Super cheap, 5 gold build. It only took us 5 gold to build this out. And another cool aspect of the budget builds is that it allows us to be more flexible with our weapons and allows us to test out fun weapons we find. So gearing these weapon sets only costs us about like 50 silver for each weapon set. So if you are trying out sword, and you're like, oh, I don't like sword, what are the other weapons I can do? You can come to this weapon skills, and you can see all the different weapons you can use. Some of them are bound to elite specs, or you need the Secrets of the Obscure expansion to unlock. But let's say you wanted a ranged option, you could buy a hammer for 50 silver and geared up the same way you have your staff geared, and then you also have this hammer weapon you could use at range on the build. You could buy mace, you could buy scepter, you could buy, again, staff, shield is the herald weapon. But because the gear we're using is so cheap, it allows you to be more flexible and test out a lot more things. So the last thing I'm going to do is just showcase a little bit of the open world, just to prove like, hey, this will do stuff in open world. You're not going to feel completely at a loss on this build. So last thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little End of Dragons hero point, just be like, hey, this build will work for general casual open world play. It's probably not going to hold up on super difficult group content, like soloing group content, but that's not why we're here, right? We're here for a cheap test build that allows us to get a feel for a class and see if we want to maybe later invest more money, more in-game resources to build it out. So last thing we're going to do is we're going to go to my go-to End of Dragons hero point and test the build there. And so again, when you're running around on this build, you want to make sure you have these three facets just always running to get your boons up front. Ooh, that's not the one we want. We don't actually want to fight the Saboteur. So the Saboteur is all builds that rely heavily on boons are gonna struggle on this one. So we're probably not gonna fight him. I'm gonna go to a different one once we get out of combat. The Saboteur is like the only one that spawns there that we really don't want to do. So I'm gonna go do a different one. But real quick, we could do, while we're over here, we could just I could just show you like how the build works on lower level enemies. So real quick, I'm gonna do this, this.
You can't leave now.
And we actually have a stun break there that we can use if we really want to.
I'll be okay. I'll be.
As you can see, we're against veteran enemies in a late game zone, End of Dragons, and we have, again, full boons of quickness, fury, regen, swiftness, might, protection. And you have to be playing the build a little fast to get the full uptime on protection. But the build's pretty strong, right? Like, even if we go down to these veteran cap over here. They're going to try to CC us because a lot of these tougher opponents like to CC, but we have good stun breaks on this build, and Dwarf is good utility. You could run Shiro instead of Dwarf, and that'll do more damage, but it'll be a little less utility, which is why I run Dwarf. But here, so just really quickly so we can see a hero point challenge, I'm going to go over here to this one. Again, we don't want to test, the Saboteur is a bad demo, right? You'll be able to kill a Saboteur on this build, but you just have to be more careful, because any build that intentionally leverages boons is going to struggle really hard on the Saboteur, no matter what the rarity is, no matter how strong the build is. You're going to find very few strong open world builds that don't struggle against the Saboteur because of the way they're designed. They're literally designed to punish you for having a strong build, which is why I don't really like them as enemies, but oh well. Alright, we don't have a... Because we're budget build, we don't have a Jade Bot Core, but you can also add a Jade Bot Core, and that'll give you a little bit of flat HP. And so the hero point we're going to is the one on top of the library over here. And the problem with New Kaining is the waypoints aren't very efficient. The waypoint placement is pretty terrible in this map. Like, there's no way around that. So we're going to go up here. We're going to kill this ritualist. switched to staff so we could CC a little bit at the beginning. But you can see we're doing pretty good damage in an End of Dragons map on an elite enemy. And we really haven't taken any damage. Right, and so there you go, End of Dragons Hero Point. So this build is good, right? It's a good build, it's a quality build. Again, it's got really good boon access, really good utility. It's flexible, you can run a lot of different weapons in your offhand. If you're not feeling staff and you don't like staff that much, you could instead run hammer, you could run greatsword for just another damage option to up your rotation a little more. But this is a new series, just budget builds, right? 5 gold, and you've got this awesome open world build on a class that you can test out and do a lot of cool things with. Super easy to gear, as you saw. I geared it live for you on this video. And yeah, so this is budget builds. If you think this is a cool idea and you want to see more accessible, low cost, low commitment builds from me, I already have a few others builded out, theory crafted out. And so if you want to see more, just give this video attention, share this video around, and I'll do more of them. I think this is a really good opportunity for us to offer a different avenue for approaching open world buildcraft away from super expensive, fully optimized builds and into this more approachable, accessible avenue. So again, this is Mandala, and thanks for watching. So see you later. Bye.